Hi, Assalamualaikum everyone. My name is Muhammad Idin Bifisol. I am a test. Wait, what?
Alright, so we can begin now, everyone. Alright, so oh, right. Alright. Testing, testing, one, two, three. Testing, testing, one, two, three. Okay, good. Alright, so let us begin our forum discussion. So, good morning, everyone. I hope that all of you are having a pleasant morning. We, Group 6 of LMC of the course Advanced Communication Project, will be doing a forum discussion on our findings regarding the cultural differences affecting learning behaviors among UCAM students. And alright, before moving on to the discussion, I would like to first introduce myself. My name is Milan Hawimadong, metric number A190610, and today I will be the moderator for our forum discussion. And my fellow panels, please introduce yourselves first.
Hi, I'm Kinkit and my matrix number is 8189548.
Hello, my name is Farawadi Hamdi Rosli. My matrix number is A189641.
Hi, my name is Nur Sabrina binti Muhammad Zabri. My matrix number is A186670.
Hi everyone, I'm Nabila Umairah binti Shamalwati and my matric number is A189607.
Alright, so thank you, everyone. So and also we also have two esteemed guests that will be joining our forum discussion today. So why don't you guys introduce yourselves?
Alright. Hi everyone. My name is Nur Akilawita Azhar with matric number A189506.
Hi, my name is Koga Anadarantiwarutu and my matrix number is A190388.
Alright, thank you very much. So now we can begin with our forum discussion. But first things first, up to this point, we have actually managed to distribute Google Forms whereby we ask UCAM students, all right, of various culture, the Malay culture, the Indian culture, and the Chinese culture, questions mostly focused on about their learning behaviors. So, um, and based on their based on the data, all right, based on their responses, we managed to get all kinds of info regarding their learning approaches and how it differs from one and another. And right after and once we got the data results and analyzed it thoroughly, there's one section of the data that piqued my interest, which piqued my interest, whereby it involves social relationships. So what I noticed is that Malay and Chinese students, they tend to be more authority oriented, whereas Indian students are more towards
Equal.
equally oriented. So any of you panels would like to explain this matter?
Yeah, I would like to explain about this. So, as what Milan said just now, Malay and Chinese students they tend to be authority oriented. What does that mean? It means that they tend to think that lecturers should be treated as unchallenged authorities, and all the information from teachers or lecturers are to be taken without any questions. However, for Indian students, which are more equally oriented, they believe that teachers are to be treated as equals and you can challenge your teachers or lecturers in regards of understanding or debating on a point of opinion. And from what we see that is that authority oriented students they tend to be more self-reserved and they do not speak up much as those who are equally oriented where they will present their own points of opinions. In my experience, I do believe that Chinese students will be more authority oriented as they tend to accept whatever facts that are given to them and they will not try to challenge the teachers. Um, this may be due to the Asian culture where we tend to defer to authority instead of having the courage to having the courage to speak up and give their own points of opinions. So that's from my experience. What do you think, Kogulin?
Well, I agree with you as so far as I can understand.
I mean, like, if I want to add more, I, as a Malay student, so like we believe like the majority of us is Malay, and also, and most of us is Muslim. So in our Islam teaching, like we are teaching from we child, so like we need to respect the authority figure. Like the authority figure is what is knowledgeable, is more knowledge, has more knowledge compared to us. So even though that we want to challenge them, and we need to give more feedback, but it need to have more boundary. We need to set up the boundary so that we can respect, and also we want to improve what we want to achieve. So
Yeah, I do agree with that. As we can see, instead from our own experiences in the classroom, there are lack of people who are willing to question or even speak up during the lectures, as they tend to be more authority. They tend to defer to the lecturers as someone who are more knowledgeable, instead of thinking that their lecturers are still humans and they might make mistakes. So that is the authority oriented way of learning. So I think that's, is there anything to add here?
So with that in mind, I understand your point of view regarding the how they are oriented in their own ways. All right. So I have another question. All right. Based on the data, um, Chinese students. All right. Because based on my own experience, I do think that Chinese students are tend to be collectivist, whereas Indian and Malay students, they tend to be more individualistic, and my opinion is the data that we obtain through the Google Forms actually conforms to my idea as well. So what are your thoughts on this? Can get
For me, I think that being collectivist is a part of being in an Asian society where they tend to be more accommodating and they will only speak up in limited situations to, so that the harmony in between the groups will be sustained. Whereas, as you said just now, Milan, Indian and Malay students tend to be more individualistic. Yes, that might be true, but it also depends on a case-to-case basis. But in general, we can see that they are still in a very big group. We can still see there are still collectivists. However, individualistic traits are good as it allows one to speak up and challenge a point of view, so that we will have more discussions and there will be more thoughts on how best to approach a problem. So that is my view on collectivism and individualism. However, because we are in Asian society where collectivism is way more appreciated instead of individualism as those in the Western countries. There are pros and cons to this, but I would suggest that everyone find a balance in between those two. Yeah. How about you, Nabila? What do you think of this?
For me, I believe that collectivism is a more effective approach towards learning, especially because when we are learning a topic, there's no guarantee that we can understand each of the topic that is taught. So it's better for us to practice like a group work or a combined effort for us to strive together to achieve success. Because I think that if we work together as a team or work together as a group, we can understand the studies better.
I see. Um, I do agree with that point, but I would like to beg to differ on one point, which is on collectivism. Doesn't it promote herd mentality? Where herd mentality means that people will just follow whatever the norm is, where they won't challenge anything and they will say, "Oh, I follow this because of tradition, or because that is what people do previously, and this is what majority of the people do." although that may be a wrong thing. So I beg to differ on that.
Okay,
What do you
in
think?
my opinion, okay, I see where you're coming from, and I do think that you have a point. I think that it is important for us to step away from the crowd, to challenge ourselves, to challenge the norm, as you said. But I still, maybe it's just from, in my opinion, for me personally, I prefer a collective approach towards studying. But I do see how certain students prefer an individualistic approach. Maybe for them, they work better on their own, or they can study better if they do it alone.
I see. Right. How about you, Akila? What's your take on this?
I think I will agree with Nabila because some people they just prefer to do it alone rather than being in a group because sometimes when you learn with people and you have different tastes, you tend to be pressured on how fast you're not catching up to them. So yeah, I have to be on Nabila's side on this.
Alright, so that's about the individual and collectivism, where both has its pros and cons. So it is up to the viewers to decide whether you want to be a collectivist or individualistic, and in what situations you would like to be a collectivist or an individualist. So we have listened for opinions from Nabila and Akila. We'll now proceed to an interview that we have done on Brandon, where he will explain about his learning behavior. Let's have a look at it.
Today I will be doing an interview, and first things first, can you introduce yourself?
Hello everyone, my name is Brandon Gunn and I go with the metric number of A193057. I'm a first year student of Mansion under the Faculty of Science, Socials and Humanity.
Alright, thank you. So now I will be asking him various questions regarding our project. So, alright, how much do you know about the different approaches towards learning?
So generally for me, based on my prior knowledge, the type of studying method that I'm aware of is visual study and auditory study method. Whereby people who uses visual study, they tend to memorize things based on what they've seen and what they understand, like studying through images or videos. However, for auditory study method is more on what you hear personally from the teachers or from the lecturers.
Alright, so as a student, do you have a preferred method of learning?
For me personally, I have a very complex style of study method, and generally it depends on my mood as well. Sometimes I'll go for auditory study method, and sometimes I'll prefer visual as well.
Are you familiar with the concept of cultural difference theory?
As an intercultural student, I'm very much aware with the differences of culture that existed in our society, especially in Malaysia. Since we are a very complex and diverse community, I believe we have myriad amount of culture in Malaysia as well. There's Chinese, Indian, Malay, Kadazan, and Sabah Sarawak, and so much more. So yeah, as a Malaysian, I can say I'm aware of the cultural differences.
Alright.
Yeah.
Alright, so on to the third question. Do you think that other variables like level of education or classroom environment influence the prevalence of this theory?
Yes, actually. So to me, from my personal point of view, I feel like the difference of our education levels separate us as a society. So as you're well aware of, in Malaysia, we have society class, which in Malay we call it class social. So it's basically separating people based on their education level, whereby people who tend to have a higher education background, they have the tendency to only like initiate or associate with people with the same level of education. And people with the lower education background, for instance, those who are living in poverty or in like underdeveloped areas, they tend to stick around with people who come from the same background or share the same perspective as they do, because it makes it easier for them to communicate and go through their daily life.
So, next question. Have you observed any instances where differences in cultural background affect how students behave in the classroom?
thank you very much for the question. I believe that the cultural differences don't give a direct impact on how students behave in the classroom. I feel actually the way students behave in the classroom, it all depends on their habits, their behavior, and how they were in their family.
Alright, so on to the fifth question. Based on your opinion, does cultural background play a predominant role in influencing students' learning behaviors, or are there any other key factors affecting this?
So personally for me, I feel like your cultural differences don't actually play a predominant role in choosing or deciding the way or the method of studying one paper. I feel like this is more on individual perspective and individual choices. So I feel like cultural differences don't actually play a predominant role in determining your studying method.
Alright, thank you very much. So last question. If cultural differences do affect how students approach their studies, are there any positive or negative impacts to this?
Thank you for the question. So personally for me, I feel like if cultural differences were to play a role in deciding how a student choose to study and how they learn their school syllabus or any certain type of subject or courses, I feel like this will most likely give a negative impact on our society. Because as human, we have the tendency to mix around people of the same background and origins. For example, people who share the same similarities tend to initiate or associate with one another who share the same interests. So if cultural differences were to play a role here, I feel like it will make it hard for all of us to integrate and mix with one another. And if cultural differences were to play a role, I feel like it will make it very hard for our society to socialize and speak with one another as well, because culture tend to build a wall or a barrier among one another, which make it hard for us to mix with one another, because we tend to stereotype people and we tend to build prejudice against one another. So yeah, if cultural differences were to play a role, it will give a very negative impact on our society. That's from me.
Alright, thank you very much. So that's all the questions that I have for you today. So thank you very much for your time and have a good day.
Thank you, and I wish you all the best in your assignment.
Alright, thank you.
All right. So what we have seen right just now was my interview with one of my fellow interviewees. His name was Brandon. However, he was not able to make it into today's forum discussion because he had personal matters that he had to attend to. However, based on that interview, I found his opinions very interesting, whereby he said that one's culture does not really affect one's learning behavior, which really contradicts with our project. However, with the points he said, I can it I can make sense of what he said, and yes, I do have to agree with some points that maybe there are some people, all right, where their culture does not affect them, but it's their personality or maybe like their surroundings when they are growing up that really affects them and create them for who they are today. So this brings me to the next question. Based on the data distributions of the Google Forms, I found out that students from all races, they tend to be more to nurture, all right, and and as for Chinese and Malay students, all right, they are a little bit like a little bit towards the challenging aspect of their learning behavior. So Nabila, you look like you would like to explain about this issue. So what's your opinion on this?
Yes, thank you, Milan. Okay, so this is the nurture versus challenge aspect of the study. So for me, this is an interesting one because it refers to how a student approach learning according to their personal goals or their physical classroom. So do they prefer a more challenge determined attitude, or do they prefer like a modest or laid back approach, focusing instead on collective success rather than self-oriented goals. So as mentioned just now, the students, the Malay, Chinese, and Indian students, they tend to be more nurturing. But if we were to look at it in a more detail, the Malay and the Chinese students, they tend to be a little bit more challenge oriented. So for me, the nurturing aspect. So for nurturing, the students who are nurturing, they prefer collaboration and modesty as compared to other aspects like competition and assertiveness. So we can see this in the traditional classroom. So for the nurture system, it opposes the notion that students have to constantly perform, to constantly outdo each other. Instead, nurture, it will relish in the opinion that failure is seen as an opportunity for growth and also for improvement. So from the survey, we can see that the Malay and the Chinese students, they tend to be a little bit more challenge oriented. So they tend to compete to be the best as well as seeking for recognition and also acknowledgement, whether it be from their peers, their lecturers, or just through general public perception. So what do you guys think about this?
Can I add?
Yeah,
So,
sure.
like technically for me, based on what I see right now, I would prefer on challenging aspect. So, like for example, you say that Malay and Chinese students preferably to be more challenge oriented, right? So, like for me, I see that I'm more to challenging oriented because currently there's a lot of people that have a good academic performance. So technically, if we want to present ourselves in the job industry. So I think that the awards and the recognition is very important for us to present in the job industry. So that's for me.
Okay, thank you for your opinion. Okay, so now allow me to add a little bit of my own personal experience. So I spent my secondary education in a cluster school. So basically, of course, there's heavy emphasis given on academic performances. So there's immense pressure given on the students to constantly outperform themselves and others. So the students were segregated according to their achievements. So the students who achieved the best grades, they will be placed in the first class and so on. So I believe that other school also enjoy the same system. And so as a result of this, there's this pressure on students. And for my school, it mainly consists of Malay students. So from what I observed, these Malay students, a handful of them, well, a large number of them, they tend to thrive under these conditions. So they tend to do well in a challenging learning environment. On the other hand, there are students like me who can do well in under challenging acts, but at the same time, I think especially after entering university, I think I prefer a more nurturing environment because for me, I believe that as I mentioned just now, I believe that collectivism and collaboration it works better for my learning approach.
So like I'm from MRSM. So the system is technically is very different from the government high school. So like MRSM, of course, we do have the that competition, but uh, even though we do have some of us has a very good height, a very good achievement in academic, but actually we do not classify ourselves based on the achievement. It's actually very random. So like in big class, there will be at least one that is very good at certain subject, very good and perform in the academic. So the system is, I would say, our system is Emerson high school system is different from your high school. So yeah.
Yeah, okay, that's an interesting addition. Can
May I
you?
add something?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm from a missionary school, and my school is a bit different, where we practice no streaming or and zero indifference, where students from different academic achievements they will be packed in a same class. And from that, actually, between nurture and versus challenge, I am actually in between the both of them because I do believe that some challenges must be done so that people will be motivated to be the best version of themselves. But however, the nurturing component is also important because the end goal of education is that we learn together so that we can spread the knowledge around. And so, for me, I think that nurturing is good if nurturing is for me I prefer nurturing because by nurturing we can teach others but we can bring up everyone together However, in that nurturing condition, we must have set up a bit of competition, not too much, so that everyone will be able to push themselves to be the best version of themselves. So that's my opinion.
Right, that's very interesting. I do think that there should be we should strike a balance between both nurture and challenge to uh, push students to challenge themselves to the limit. But at the same time, the nurturing is also important because I think cultivating collaboration among your peers is a great tool to enhance our understanding, especially in studies. So, Lina, do you have any opinions?
Okay, from based on my experience, I am from a school that only has Malay students. So in that school, um, the the environment is more about challenge. Okay, to a class based on our grades. So that is actually, in my opinion, that is very bad. It is not good, because we are set by our grades and performance, and our teachers are not giving a good contribution to the people who are at the back class, at the class from the lower grade. So I think in Malay we are usually distributed by that. So for me, challenging is not really good. It's not good. So we need to do more nature.
Okay, yes, I agree with you because for me also, I think separating students according to their grades is not only affecting the confidence of the students from the lower class, but also from what I observe, teachers tend to give more attention towards the students who are in the first class and so on. Okay, so okay, that's basically for nurture this challenge. To sum it up, the students from all the races tend to lean towards nurturing. However, the Malay and Chinese students they do uh, tend to be a bit more challenge oriented. But I think this still differs from each student to another according to their own preferred method of learning. Okay, so now there's another aspect of the study that I would like to discuss further. But before that, I think we can go on to a short intermission of this interview that I did with Edith, a faculty, a TESOL student. I think we move on now.
Assalamualaikum. Hi Ain, how are you?
Hi and Assalamualaikum everyone. My name is Muhammad Idin Bifisol. I am a TESOL Year 2 student and I'm from Faculty of Education. So now let's continue with the questions. So for the first question, I know a little bit about the different approaches to learning used in school, but from what I can recall, there are mainly three basic types of learning theory, which are behaviorist, cognitive constructivist, and social constructivist theory. So each one of these is defined by four aspects, which are a view of knowledge, view of learning, view of motivation, and its implication for teaching. So for me myself, I prefer the method of learning which is leaning towards behaviorist theory. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the second question. So um, for this question, yes, I do believe in the prevalence of the cultural difference theory to an extent. And also, I do agree that differences in individuals' upbringing influence the way they approach their studies. I also think that living in a multicultural society that we have so many traditions, cultures, and different upbringing um, will influence this how we learn, how we study. So for the third question, um level of education here refers to the secondary school versus university classroom. For example, I do think that in high school settings, students of different races are more likely to show difference in the way they learn. Um, that it doesn't get more, it does get more apparent as students move on to tertiary education. Because the way I see it, in high school right now, we have these sets of rules so that students can follow, and also the guidelines to shape the students themselves. So as compared to university, um, this is mainly speaking from my experience. University grant us much more freedom where there's no one to tell us what to do. So it is all depends on us. So this is why study approach that we use in high school might not work, because might not work well in university. For the fourth question, I do observe if there's any differences between the culture background that affects the students' behavior in classroom. But I think that that's not the case, where the culture background actually doesn't affect the how the students behave in class, because at the end of the day it's on based on the student itself, and also how their parents actually um warn them. So for the fifth question, I didn't think that cultural background plays a predominant role in influencing students' learning behavior, because I think at the end of the day it's all based on the family background itself. Because as we can see, if the students are from a poor background family, so they are more likely to work, because um to live in this era, we need money. So because of that, the education itself is not very important than money. Okay, so for the last question, which is so for the last question, um, I think that cultural differences do affect on how students approach their studies. So I think there is a positive impacts of this, because it can allow students from different cultural background to exchange ideas or the methods of learning approach with one another, and also they can integrate the learning behaviors from students from other cultures. So I think that is all from me. Thank you.
Okay, so that's an interview from Eden. Also, I would like, I forgot to mention this now, due to time restriction and venue availability, we weren't able to do a face-to-face interview, so I just gave him a list of the questions and he just answered it as he go. So, from according to that interview, it's interesting to see the perspective from a student of the Faculty of Education. So, according to him, he does believe that cultural differences do affect a student's learning behavior. However, he did add that there are other factors at hand here. For example, the level of education, secondary education versus university, and also financial background, which affects how students approach learning. Now, I would like to go back to the study. So, as I mentioned just now, there's another aspect that I would like to discuss further, which is stability versus uncertainty. So, when looking at the survey, and this one is fascinating because from the survey we can gather that Chinese students uh, they are more open towards accepting uncertainty compared to Indian and Malay students. So, what is actually stability versus uncertainty? So, stability versus uncertainty refers to how a student deals with uncertainty. So, do they prefer a structure and order, or are they more open to taking advantage of versatility and also flexibility? So before we move further, I think allow me to elaborate more on these terms from my perspective. So according my point of view, stability is characterized by rigid thinking. So this is associated with desire for predictability, and also difficulties in accepting that their expectations are not reached. On the other hand, students who are more open towards uncertainty, they have a more flexible thinking, meaning that they are better adjusted to new circumstances and they are not restricted to certain rules and regulations. So, Kinki, if I may ask, as a Chinese student, do you prefer stability, or are you more open towards uncertainty as we look at the results of the survey?
Right, thank you. So in my opinion, I used to be a very stability person where I prefer structured order and things that have been done from the past must be continued on and we should not change it. But nowadays, I've been moving towards uncertainty because through uncertainty, I can discover new things. I am more open to other people's thoughts, and I will also be able to get to explore more about things that I've never known before because I dare to take leaps in finding out why, and yeah, basically I'm willing to take more risks, which is basically an uncertainty point. And because of the change from stability to uncertainty, um, yes, for in my experience, it has been a bit tough because I am moving towards out of my comfort zone where everything has been planned out nicely towards a more unorganized but a more exciting route, I would say. Because through uncertainties, you will get to know your limits and you will dare to take leaps that you have never, that you won't dare to do last time. And through this, you will know that, oh, actually, my limit is way more than this. Actually, oh, I have this ability instead of being a stability person. So that's my point of view.
I want.
No, you may.
Okay, so I want to add regarding stability and uncertainty. So uncertainty is what being open-minded to new perspective. So like if we see in this current situation, like in sciences, so more research had done and more experiment, we get proof from something in which that we need to do a lot of observation and experiments. So like I give you an example, like there is one time where community believe that the earth is stationary and then like the sun is moving around us. But after there's a lot of experiment done and also a lot of observation, and at that time community believe that this is right and they don't agree with the facts. So if there is uncertainty, we keep on learning, we keep on curious on what we learn right now. So because of there's a lot, there more tend to have more experience and observation. So right now, there will be difference in terms of point of view. So like for example, so the difference between before that, we believe that the Earth is uh, moving around, is the stationary. So right now, is the sun is actually a stationary. So in which we get these facts based on observation, based on experiment. So that's what I would say on uncertainty.
All right. So thank you very much, Farah. So I would like to agree. So I like to agree with Kinkit, Farah, and Nabila as well. So I used to be a stability focused person, I would say, whereby I will just expect that things will turn out my way, but when they don't, I will eventually feel disappointed. And through time, these types of situations kept going on for me. So in the end, I chose the, just like you guys has just like what Kinke has mentioned, he chose the uncertainty aspect path for him. And when I follow that path, everything in life for me like like became more interesting. I'm looking forward to the things that are going to happen in the future.
Yes.
All right. So talking about talking about like stability and uncertainty, here comes this part of the data respondents where I would require some explanation, whereby it involves logical versus reasonable thinking. All right, so based on my experience, all right, from my personal experience in high school, I found out that Malay students tend to be more reasonable, whereas Chinese and Indian students tend to be more logical. However, based on our data, based on the respondents, it says otherwise. Whereby Malay, Chinese, and Indian students think they are more to being reasonable. What are your thoughts on this, Sabrina?
Okay, before that, thank you for that. Let me explain what is the difference between logical and reasonable. Okay, logical, from the perspective of Anthony Behaviour, a professor from York University, logic is about validity, what follows from what and why. And people with logical arguments like to think in a rigid ways, like they have their own ways of thinking. While reasonable is to give rationale to something that's generally considered an act of applying logic to find explanations that make sense. Okay, in Malay culture, we have being virtuous. Virtuous is important. Okay, so they bring it from the culture, they bring it in their learning method. Okay, so Malay students, they like to have harmonious discussion, then argumentation and being right. And they also accepting different perspectives really well. Okay, but for Chinese and Indian, from the data that we get, Chinese and Indian also, they like to be in a reasonable discussion, right? But in real life situation, we can see that Indian students are more outspoken than Malay and Chinese students. Okay, and just bear in mind that I'm not saying that being a logical argumentation, being left left to have logical argumentation is not being good, because that they have their own way to speak what they think. They like to have a discussion that is more firm. They like to have um, one rigid um, one rigid discussion. Okay, so in logical, they also focus on logical argumentation, and only small part of students in universities they like to do that, debate and argumentation. And people who love logical arguments also have willingness to challenge others when the teacher or the students are presumed wrong or being inconsistent. Okay, and they speak up for something they need to know, and the logic, they need to know the logic, and they only have one decision. They don't like to think about, oh, this is okay, this is okay. No, they from what they think, we can only have one decision. Okay, this is very different from reasonable discussion. Acceptance of contradictions for the sake of continuing and harmonious dialogue, and acceptance of multiple truth based on experience. So they're not only from the facts from the book, it is based from experience, from what they heard, and that's on. And they still discussing, but they still consider of others. It doesn't mean that they only have one rigid decision, so they can accept anything what they say, and they will find the truth about it by themselves in a harmonious way, not in debate and so on. So, what can I say? Malay students, we can negotiate with them well, okay? Uh, Less than we want to negotiate with Chinese and especially with Indian students, because they are more outspoken, and if they think they don't like it, and they will say it, and if they think that what we decide is wrong, and they will argue with us just because they want to find the truth, the only one, the only right decision. Okay, so I want to ask Akila, as a Malay student, do you agree with me that we, as a Malay student, we like to have reasonable discussion?
Yes, for me, personally, and from my experience as well, I believe that we especially prefer reasonable discussion over logical argumentation, because when we are in a discussion, we allow everyone to voice out their thoughts, and we open ourselves up to new information and possibilities. Whereas, on the other hand, if we are in logical argumentation, such as debate, we tend to get worked up and being obsessed over being right. So uh, more often than not, they like their emotions get the best of them, and then like they overshadow their reasonable parts.
Okay. Okay, so that is why I say that we can negotiate well with Malay students other than Indian and Chinese students.
Well, I would add some more
Yes.
regarding the logical and reasonable. So myself would prefer logical way thinking. So like I give you two situations. So like in a classroom, there is a teacher, and then the children in the classroom don't know what the teacher will be asking, and they literally don't have any knowledge regarding what the teacher want to ask them. So like for example, if the teacher is like is drawing a shape in which a circle, and we all know that this is a circle shape, and then the children know nothing. So like literally, so the teacher asks the students in the classroom whether this shape is circle or a square. So majority of them answer square. So like if I present in the classroom without any knowledge regarding what the teacher is asking, I would prefer with them, and then I will open to more point of view. But if I know what is the teacher is questioning, so I would literally argue with them, and I want to be argue with them and tell them that actually this is a circle and give them a lot of proof. So like it technically for me it depends on the situation itself. So to be logical and reasonable. So like for example reasonable, if we don't have that much particular knowledge on that one area and all of us have the same level of knowledge level, so I would say I would prefer reasonable. If I believe that I myself is confident in that particular area, I would be more logical and argue with them. So yeah.
Alright, so what I've seen so far, for to up to this point, our conversation seems the learning methods that we're talking about right now is more focused on situational uh, conditions. All right, so this brings me to the next question or to the next point, because based on the data respondents, it is found that Chinese and Malay students tend to focus on situations, while Indian students tend to be more focused on causality. So, what any of you would like to explain about this?
So I would say about that. So causality versus system. So what is actually causality? So causality is more on goal oriented, and we want to keep a stability in terms of rules and knowledge. Meanwhile, system is based on the situational constraint. So like I give you simple analogy. So like I would say causality is the goal, system is the habit that we make up to get the progress. So like if in my experience, I want to get an A in machine learning. So like it's A is my goals, and what I want to do to achieve that is the system. So if I'm more to A, but my system, my habit, I don't do any project, I don't do any coding exercise. So technically, the result we won't get much with the result. So if I don't have set particular goal for in my subject, but system is based on the commitment. So if every day I research on the machine learning, I research on coding, I do coding every day. So like technically, we will get the output, the result that we, even though we don't set up the goal. Yeah. So that's my point of view. So Akila, so which one would you prefer? Causality or system?
Thank you, Farah, for the question. For me, I think I'm going to stand with you because I believe in system rather than the goals. Because setting up a goal is like deciding on the destination, but
Yes.
having the systems is like having the directions to go to it. And plus, what's the function of having a destination if you do not know where you're going, right? Plus, this leads to the next problem where winners and losers have the same goal. So goal setting is severely affected by survivorship bias, whereas we think that success people uh, only succeed because they set a goal. We often forget about those who have the same goals but fail at it. So Yeah, I think I rather believe with the systems. It is better for us to focus on the systems rather than the goals because there was once a basketball coach once said that the score will take care of itself. That's actually
So like causality versus system. So causality is the goal. So we are planning to go in that direction. So system is what we make the progress to achieve a goal. So that's all for me.
I would like to add, having goals are important because it will provide us a direction where we want to go. Because, like they said, a ship can go anywhere, but without a direction, it will reach nowhere. However, during that process, in achieving the goals, we must also enjoy the process of reaching that goal because it is through those processes that we will grow and we will learn something. And throughout the way in the systems, throughout the way when we go through, our goal might shift. Let's say, for example, now my goal is to get an A in machine learning. But throughout the process, you learn that getting an A is not really important. Whereas learning how to use that machine learning and applying it, that is the goal at the end of the day. So I would say that I would prefer to be a systems person where my goal will be flexible, where my goal can shift according to the situation.
Actually, for me, before this, based on my old self, so like in high school, I would prefer more on causality compared to right now. I would prefer on system. So like we set up the goal like we want to get 9 A straight in SPM. So we have the goals, and then like most of my time I've achieved a lot of what I want. But compared to when I went to university, it's actually quite draining with the tight schedule and all that. So I believe that all the assignments or the lectures give us is the system itself. So I want to commit to the assignment so that I will do better in my academic performance. So yeah.
All right, so thank you very much, all of you, for your points given. It was explained very thoroughly and detailed. It was well done. So we're close to an end for our forum discussion. However, we are now open to questions from our panels or maybe our esteemed guests or even our viewers today. So
Yeah, will there be any questions from our audience? You may type it in the live chat.
if there are any questions, just type in live chat.
All right. So now we have a question from Kobulan, which what if I prefer both causality and system?
Alright, so in my point of view, actually we should find balance between the goal and the system itself. So like if I myself in history subject, so like I usually got an eight, I usually got this in this subject, and then like I want to set the impossible in which I want to get an A in this particular subject. So like I set up as 100 as impossible. So with that way I will what we call that, I will commit more compared to what I usually do. So actually based on you guys, we should find balance between system and possibility. So yeah.
That's all. All right. So for the second question, what is the best learning method?
Okay. I want to answer that question. What is the best learning method between Malay, Chinese, or Indian? Okay, actually, every culture has its own specialty. So we need to organize it well and we need to balance it well. There is no best culture of learning method. No, actually, every culture has its own specialty, and we can take the best from every culture and apply it in our learning method so that we can get good performance in our studies. That's from my perspective.
I will also, please.
Thank you. If I may add a bit more, I do agree with Sabrina. I think there's no one correct way to approach studies. As she mentioned just now, every student even has their own preferred method of learning. And I think the most important thing here is to not be rigid in your method of learning. For example, maybe in secondary, maybe in high school, maybe you prefer a challenge-oriented learning environment. But maybe as you move forward to university, you find that a nurturing environment works better for you. So it's important for you to keep an open mind for students to continuously assess their learning approach to figure out which of these works best for them.
I would also like to add that learning behaviors among different cultures have like what Nabila said just now. Every culture has its own learning behaviors, and each of us has your own style of learning. And I do believe that there may be differences between learning behaviors, which causes them to perform better. But it is also on a case-to-case basis where for the students who are from a Malay culture, they might be better in this one particular area, and for the Chinese and the Indians, they might be better at another area. So, like what Nabila said also, it's best to keep an open mind and keep on improving your learning behaviors according to the needs, your current needs. So, where you will be able to modify and fit all of those pros into one package where you will succeed using that area. And as what Nabila said also, you need to keep on continuing assessing your learning behaviors so that you will keep up with the current needs and not stuck in the past. That's my point. So
Alright, so that marks the end of our question session. So before ending this forum discussion, I would like to give my some concluding remarks about this discussion. So, so there are many opinions when it comes to learning methods, but at the end of the day, all we want is for a better future. So with that in mind, it is okay if you cannot have your own learning method yet, because life is not easy. You can't just like in one day you follow that method and you are able to. It's hard to like follow things consistently for some people, right? Because it is very situational where you have to adapt to your surroundings. There might be some maybe maybe some factors that might disturb your routine here and there. So at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. It's alright if you can't follow a learning method, and but as long as, in my opinion, as long as you are trying your best and still studying in various new ways, you'll eventually be able to make it at the end of the day. So with that, thank you everyone for your time for our forum discussion today, and I hope that everyone has a great day.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
everyone.
Thank you
Thank you to the
everyone.
viewers.
Bye.